Over 6 decades, ITV has recorded life in an ever-changing Britain.
Hello, sir. Do you think women should wear trousers?
No.
When do you think women should wear trousers?
Well, when they're doing the housework.
In this series, we're celebrating an extraordinary archive of real-life footage from across the country.
I always thought hot pants were for both sexes, but it occurred to me, although I'd seen plenty of girls wearing them, I haven't seen any fellas in them.
Clips that show just how much our lives have moved on. From what we eat...
This is Birmingham's only horse butcher's. He's been here for 20 years.
...to the weird and wonderful thoughts of the man on the street.
Can you tell me what you know about Einstein's theory of relativity?
Oh, I like it and that, and they put a really good showing on that. And, I like it very much indeed.
This was Britain as seen on ITV. Over the past 6 decades, Britain has changed beyond recognition. But tonight we celebrate some of the things for which we are still famous around the world. Yes, these are the things that help give Britain its unique national identity. Whether it's our love of fish and chips, the good old British bobby,
Good morning, sir.
or our, shall we say, unpredictable weather. And then there's the great British eccentric. Since the birth of ITV in the 1950s, we've been intrigued by fascinating and unorthodox characters who seem to belong to a very different Britain to the one we know today.
Good morning. Hi, nice to meet you.
Take this regional news report from ATV in the Midlands about a man who lived up a tree.
Good evening, Mr. Gunnell. Thank you very much for inviting me into your nest, as it were. Tell me, first of all, when did you decide to live in the open air?
Well, when I was 14.
Really? And during the 28 years that you've lived up this tree, have you ever spent a night in the house?
No.
You never have?
No.
Finally, don't you ever find it desperately lonely living up here?
No, I don't. I got me dog and we got me cats and plenty of work on the garden to do.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Gunnell, and I hope you'll spend many, many more very happy years up your tree.
Yes, I hope so.
This next news item from Huddersfield may have been filmed 34 years later, but even in the more streetwise 1990s, local television was still intrigued by out-of-the-ordinary characters. Hang on, isn't that the same dog?
This is what's known as the craziest cottage in creation, and it's home to Jake, or should that be Mr. Occupier. He was so fed up at getting letters from the TV licence people, which were addressed to the Occupier, that he changed his name to the Occupier, and they wrote back to the Occupier.
Dear Sir or Madman, we've received a television licence counterfoil for your address, but unfortunately the name is missing. And there it was, the name was on, and they've used it, but it's a mad world. So I've had to write back and say, listen, you've got my name, it is the Occupier. How many more times have I to tell you?
Mr. Occupier clearly occupied many early morning TV news conferences. 2 years later, he was back on the telly, taking part in one of the most unusual weddings ever held in Britain.
Jake used to be married to his dog Manoil. He was best man today. What else?
What else indeed? Wonder if they took him on their honeymoon. 6 decades of ITV News has also captured those who might have seemed like eccentrics at the time. But isn't that what they always say about great innovators? Take this report from Yorkshire TV in 1970.
There's never been a chef quite like Victor Lenthal. It's not so much what he cooks, but the way he cooks it. Seems a very unusual way of cooking vegetables, Victor. How is it done?
Well, first are the carrots. And I cut them like this, very fine, very quickly. And then I place them on the stove on a very low level.
Now, what would you say was the main disadvantage of cooking with one of these teapots?
The disadvantage is having a spout on the teapot itself, because it's quite possible if you put your hand over, you could get scalded.
So you think if somebody patented a teapot without a spout for cooking vegetables, they might make a fortune?
It's quite possible they could, yes.
Yes, Victor. I believe it's called a saucepan. OK, so we might not be known the world over for cooking in kettles, but here's something that has remained firmly British for decades.
Fish cake and chips, 60 times, please.
Greedy. But yes, we do love our fish and chips. In fact, between us, we Brits still eat a whopping 380 million portions a year.
Is that your favourite dinner?
Come on, you know.
It's not your favourite dinner? You don't really like fish and chips? No. What would you rather have?
Just a bag of chips.
But different times have seen different trends featuring on our unique national menu. In 1973, ATV News reported a boom in the sale of horse meat.
This is Birmingham's only horse butchers. It's been here for 20 years. In the last few months, it's enjoyed a sudden popularity. What does it taste like?
Smashing.
Yeah.
Better than ordinary meat.
Is it?
Yep.
What does your husband think of that?
He loves it.
Does he?
Yep, he buys it himself as well. And he loves it. He won't eat nothing but horse meat.
You feel it to your child, do you?
Yep. And he's only 2.5.
He's 2.5?
And it's done him no harm.
He likes it, does
Yep.
he?
By the 1960s, TV reports showed we were becoming increasingly aware of factory farming methods introduced following the Second World War. But that didn't seem to put us off a traditional roast dinner.
Sunday is not a Sunday without the joint.
I think it's something tasty that you miss. It's something you can't do without.
In fact, such was our national obsession with the Sunday roast that World in Action dedicated an entire episode to it back in 1964.
I like meat. Well, I couldn't do without meat. I would have it for my breakfast, dinner and tea. And also before I go to bed at night. I like meat a lot. It's my main dish, meat.
I'd maybe give that piece a miss though. It looks a little, well, underdone. Maybe one reason the Sunday roast became such a great British tradition was because back in the 60s there seemed to be little else to do on the Sabbath, as this news report from Grimsby delighted in pointing out.
The streets look as though the town had been struck by a plague.
Oh, watch that car.
For most people prefer the quiet family life at home. Indoors, some people catch up with the important events of the past week. Though even the Sunday papers get boring after a while.
Of course, you don't have to stay at home. You can always take the dog for a walk, or prepare for a cycle ride through the empty streets, or go on a motorbike ride to nowhere.
We just ride about because the coffee bar's closed and there's nothing else to do, and only at night we can get the pictures. And, we just go anywhere, don't really care where we go.
There's always the seafront, where at low tide the mud flats seem to stretch to the horizon.
Well, I've been sitting here for 35 minutes looking out at mud, and I intend stopping here another 35 minutes looking at mud.
So that's how people pass the time on a Sunday in the days before Downton Abbey and the internet. Something else that Britain has brought to the world is the good old local. Since 1980, 1 in 3 British pubs has seen closing time for good, and those that survived have changed beyond recognition. As this report from Cleethorpes back in 1975 proves.
Men, and men only, have been drinking in this bar for over 60 years. In fact, I'm the first woman who's been allowed in, and that's only as a special dispensation. Do you think that women should be allowed in this bar?
No, personally no, because there are so many facilities for them in the club outside of the bar. And this has, for years, I don't know how many, for 70 or 80 years, been a men's bar.
Well, why don't you want women to come in this bar?
I've seen too much trouble in other clubs where women and men are mixed. Some men messing about with other men's wives, and some wives messing about with other wives' men.
So, assuming you could find a bar that you were actually allowed into in the 1970s, how would you know that the ale on sale was of the very best quality? Well, that's where these men came in.
Once a year, the beadle, the breadweighers, the bailiff and the fish tasters set off down the streets of Ulster. Leading them are the constable and the town crier, and somewhere there in the middle are the most important men of all, the ale tasters.
Are you the landlord of this inn?
Aye, Master Bailiff.
I command you to draw 2 glasses of your best ale for my ale tasters to check and taste of the quality.
Here is my best ale.
What's your role in this?
The ale taster of the...
You're actually the man tasting the ale.
That's right.
All the rest of them are at it, but it's actually your job too.
There are only two of us that taste the ale. And
Theoretically?
Theoretically, yes. We go round all the pubs and taste the ale to see if it's worthy of man to drink.
Good people here assembled, the ale has been tasted and found to be wholesome and fit for human consumption. God save the Queen and the Lord of the Manor.
But a pint's not the only drink that Britain's become famous for the world over. And this news report from Gloucestershire in 1987 showed the type of gathering that could only happen in Britain.
Cheltenham the Elegant. At the top of the promenade stands the Queen's Hotel. It looks like one of the last bastions of the British Empire. An old watering hole it was for those army men who served in India. Inside, relics of the Empire lost. The tiger's head from Bengal, pig stickers from Pune, wild boar tusks, rifles, just props now of an age gone by. But here, life in the afternoon goes on. As the clock chimes, the cakes come out. The ladies of Cheltenham await their tea. It's still ever so quaint at the Queen's.
This afternoon we have sandwiches, seed cake, cream cakes.
I think I'd like a fruit bark, please.
Tea, as a British institution that it is not just a cup of tea and a biscuit. It is a meal in itself, and a meal to be savoured, and it's an experience more than anything else. One to be savoured and a lot of time taken over it. A good afternoon tea should last at least an hour and a half, and nothing shorter than that.
But I think nearly everybody in Cheltenham comes here for tea.
Or just to show off their clothes, I wonder.
Yes, it does sometimes become a bit of a parade, especially when the races are on.
Well, just looking around, it is quite extraordinary, isn't it, really? I mean, the outfits and the...
It's magnificent. It's the kind of thing one misses living abroad.
You're the only man here
English.
today, you know that, don't you?
Yes, I suppose that's true. Yes.
Well, the sun may have set on the Empire, but it would seem the price of a cuppa here, in all this luxury, hasn't gone up much since the relief of Mafeking. A silver pot, just £1, 25p a cup. Blimey, British Rail can't do it for that.
Coming up next, we've got more of Britain's recent history on the brew as we recall how ITV has chronicled our national obsession with the weather.
The rest of today and tonight will be mainly cloudy or dull.
We've got some arresting footage of the Great British Bobby on the beat and some hair-curling clips showing our love of dogs. Sorry, are we keeping you up, pet? Welcome back to Britain as seen on ITV, where we're plundering 60 years of extraordinary archive to see how the nation's been portrayed through our television screens.
I'm confident that they will bring you programmes which will both entertain you and make you more aware of the events in the world around you.
Tonight, we're celebrating the very best of British. So let's look at how the cameras have recorded the evolution of something we're known for the whole world over. Yes, the Great British Bobby. Television news has documented many changes in the way the police patrol our streets. From the introduction of flashy new sirens...
It could be a scene from the streets of San Francisco.
No, it couldn't.
The police yelp siren is the new sound in Gloucestershire.
To the less successful introduction of the breakdancing Bobby.
East Scotland Yard. Why do you want the police?
In the 1960s, ITV aired this arresting documentary about life at a crime-fighting institution, whose name is known in all four corners of the planet, Scotland Yard.
Scotland Yard. Scotland Yard.
For the first time, viewers were given an extraordinary insight into how the British Bobby upheld the laws of the land.
Good morning, sir.
Ably assisted by an army of civilian staff.
Oh, I don't think we go broadcasting the fact that we do work in Scotland Yard,
said the man being interviewed on a TV documentary. The programme programme showed that even in the late 60s, real-life policing was a world far removed from TV dramas of the day, like Dixon of Dock Green.
Drugs? Just a minute, what sort of drug did you say? Hash.
Of all the crimes we deal with at Scotland Yard, one of the most serious is, of course, murder. As Chief Superintendent of the Yard's Murder Squad, I have to deal with a large number of murder cases throughout the country. Much has been written about the murder bag. There is no mystique about it. It is just an ordinary leather bag. It's a little bit heavy, which is why often you find a first-class sergeant has one arm a little bit longer than another, and it contains all the things that we think an investigating officer will need on the first day of a murder investigation.
Speeding forward to 1979, this was a documentary that highlighted a new trend in law enforcement, the increasing number of women joining the force. The recently passed Sex Discrimination Act meant female officers were given exactly the same jobs to do as their male counterparts. Let's assume the men had to do this too, shall we? The film showed how senior officers were still coming to terms with female bobbies on the beat.
The girls you see this morning on parade, they came to us some 10 weeks ago, and as you can see now, they look splendid. Their uniforms fit them perfectly, they're erect, and some 10 weeks ago when they come over, some of them couldn't even walk.
Having been taught to walk, these young WPCs were ready for duty. And make no mistake about it, they were just as dedicated as their male colleagues, having joined up because they were committed to fighting crime.
Now tell me, what made you join the police force?
Well, I quite took a fancy to the police women's hat.
Well, fighting crime and wearing nice hats. It's a well-known fact that we Brits are obsessed with the weather. And according to the archives, it seems we always have been. Yes, long before the advent of smartphones, Londoners still had a way to get the latest forecast when they were out and about.
Here is the London weather forecast. There may be a few bright intervals
around midday, but the rest of today and tonight will be mainly cloudy or dull.
There will be a little drizzle at first, and more general rain is expected to arrive this afternoon.
Increasingly, forecasting the weather lies with computers and a system of prediction called numerical forecasting. The weather's becoming automated, up to a point, but men still collect the readings.
Indeed, this report went on to show the weathermen at work in their magnificent flying machines.
Farnborough, a Hastings of the Meteorological Research Flight on its daily routine, a search of clouds forming over the western areas of England.
Temperature plus 14.5, airspeed 164.
Hygrometer flap closed, please. Entry now. Should be a good record. Exit cloud now.
The British weather has always left a lot to be desired. But as this news report from the streets of Leeds shows, when the sun did come out, we never had any idea how to deal with it.
As the heat wave continues, the public must adapt their clothing to the climate. Some get it right, some get it wrong, and others simply defy description. On the whole, women have it easier. It's us chaps who struggle to combine keeping cool and looking good.
No look at Britain through modern TV history would be complete without a mention of our national love of animals, and especially our strange devotion to dogs. In fact, in the last 50 years, the canine count in the UK has almost doubled to 9 million. Hang on, is that dog driving?
Dogs come in all shapes and sizes. Some dogs are of enormous value. Others are almost completely useless.
Charming. You try telling that to this lady. She clearly had a very special relationship with her animals. In fact, these mutts were more than just pets to her. They were an investment, because even back in the 1960s, dog breeding was big business.
Introducing Champion Barantheus St Malachi, prize Yorkshire Terrier known to his friends as Mike. To him, being a show dog is much like being a fashion model. It requires much patience and much grooming. Mrs. Mary Burfield of Northolt, Middlesex, spends 15 minutes binding up his hair, not to curl it, but to keep it straight and also to stop him walking on it. Mike's happier this way, says Mrs. Burfield.
OK, but what does Mike have to say about it? Exactly. Before we go, there's just time to take a look at one last bastion of Britishness that's made headlines all over the world. In 1964, the ITV documentary series World in Action was busy saying goodbye to an old friend. No, not him. This. After 52 years of jostling for its position on the nation's newsstands, the Daily Herald was no more.
It was Britain's 5th largest daily paper, and yet it failed.
Simply, the Herald withered because half of its readers were too old and too poor. And as its readers gradually died, so the Herald itself died.
But as soon as the printing presses ground to a halt, the Herald was relaunched under a new name. The man in charge of this publication was dynamic news editor Hugh Kinsman Cudlip. And he knew if his new tabloid newspaper was to be a success, he'd have to make some groundbreaking changes.
Well, quite clearly, the woman's page needed a new look at. So we've done that in a very big way indeed, and we're not having a woman's page.
ITV's cameras captured the moment the presses rolled on the first copy of The Sun in September 1964 and showed reporters hard at work determined to get the next day's scoop.
What's all this about the Eskimos being radioactive? Really? And they're blaming it on the Russians.
Back in the 1960s, newspaper production was a very different affair to what it is now. There were no computers, no mobile phones to hack, and seemingly no teaspoons. But one thing they did have was a clever machine that could carry a piece of paper from one end of the desk to the other. Now that's what I call clever.
This brings the present series to an end. Already our camera crews are flying out to begin filming for the next season. Next week at this time, you can begin seeing an absorbing and totally new series of animal pictures called People Like Us.
A brand new 6-part drama comes to ITV. The Unforgotten starts Thursday night at 9. Well, will Sally be jilted at the altar? We're back to find out in Coronation Street next. And then at 9 tonight, one man and a dog that's driving Doc Martin barking mad.